He opened his barn for stray cats, found two alien sisters begging. "Don't send us away." Jack lived on the edge of the colony, far from the busy streets and the hum of machinery that filled most towns. His farm was small but steady, with a few fields of hardy crops and a barn that had seen better days. Every evening, as the sun sank behind the low hills, Jack would walk out with a bucket of cat food for the stray cats that had learned to trust him over the years. Some of them were cautious, some bold, but all were survivors, much like their owner. He liked their quiet company. They never asked for much beyond warmth and food, and they gave him a sense of purpose in a world that could be cold and indifferent. One chilly evening, the wind carrying the faint smell of frost and dry grass, Jack noticed a small movement near the barn. At first, he thought it was one of the cats, slipping through the shadows, but as he stepped closer, he saw two figures crouched near the hay bales. They were small, no taller than a child, but their shapes were not human. Their skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, soft and smooth, reflecting the last rays of the sun. Their eyes were enormous, dark, and filled with an emotion that immediately tugged at Jack's heart. Fear. Desperation. A silent plea. Jack paused, unsure. He had heard stories from the colony about wandering aliens, creatures who were sometimes dangerous, sometimes in trouble. But these were different. They didn't radiate hostility or menace. They looked lost, cold, and utterly alone. One of them stepped forward slightly, her voice soft but clear. "Please don't send us away." The words struck Jack. There was something in them that went beyond language, something human. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Normally, he would have called the colony guards or reported the strange visitors to the authorities, but tonight he could not. They were small, defenseless, and frightened. He set the bucket of cat food down and knelt a few feet away from them. "It's okay," he said gently. "You can stay, just don't hurt my cats." The two figures exchanged a look, one of relief so profound that it almost made Jack smile. They stepped closer, careful not to touch the cats, who had already begun to circle their legs with cautious curiosity. Jack noticed the way they moved, light, careful, almost as if they were used to avoiding attention. Their hands were delicate, fingers tapering to fine points, and their ears were slightly pointed, hidden under soft strands of hair that shimmered like silver in the fading light. "Thank you," one of them whispered. "We are hiding. They are looking for us." Jack's brow furrowed. "Looking for you? Who?" "The Empire," the smaller sister said, shivering. They take people like us. We cannot survive if they find us." Jack's mind raced. The Empire was a vast galactic power, known across several star systems for its strict control and its hunt for individuals with rare abilities. People said it was unstoppable, but Jack had never believed he would meet someone hiding from them in his quiet corner of the world. He studied the sisters, noting the way they flinched at every sound, the way their eyes darted toward the dark hills surrounding the farm. They were terrified, but not weak. There was something resilient about them, something human in their fear and courage combined. "You'll be safe here tonight," Jack said, finally standing. He unlocked the side door to the barn, the hinges creaking softly. "Come inside. There's food, water, warmth. You can rest." They hesitated at the doorway, glancing at the night beyond, where shadows moved with a life of their own. Finally, they stepped inside, careful not to touch anything too roughly. Jack lit a small lantern, the light spilling over the hay and the wooden beams, revealing the cats that had already begun to settle around the newcomers, sniffing curiously. The sisters sat down on a clean patch of hay, their eyes reflecting the flickering light. Jack returned to the barn, bringing a bucket of water and a few scraps of bread. "Eat," he said. "You must be hungry." They did not rush, but gradually they accepted the food. Jack watched them quietly, noticing little details. The way one sister's hand trembled slightly as she reached for water, the other's eyes scanning the barn for hidden threats. He had never felt such a strange mix of fear and trust in anyone before. They were aliens, yes, and yet their expressions, their movements, their reactions, they reminded him of children who had been forced to grow up too fast. "You can stay here as long as you need," Jack said, sitting down near them. "I won't call anyone. No one will know." The sisters exchanged a look, one sister reaching out to lightly touch the other's hand. We cannot stay forever," the taller one said. "They will find us if we linger too long, but thank you." Jack nodded. He did not speak. He could feel the truth in her words. The Empire was relentless. People like the sisters were often hunted for their abilities, powers that Jack could not fully comprehend but could sense in the air, in the way the barn seemed to hum faintly around them. He had no weapons, no army, nothing but his wits and his land. Yet he felt a strange confidence. These two fragile-looking aliens had chosen him, and he would not let them down. Night deepened outside the barn. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying with it the cold bite of the evening. Jack built a small fire in a safe corner, careful to keep it contained. The cats curled closer to the sisters, purring softly. Jack watched the firelight dance across their faces, noting the faint glow in their eyes, the way their skin shimmered when they moved. "I am Lyra," the taller one finally said, her voice small but steady. "This is Nea. We were traveling between colonies when the Empire found us. We could not escape fast enough. We ran, and we ran until we had nowhere to hide." Jack nodded slowly. He had always been a quiet man, used to simple routines, but something about this night felt like the beginning of something bigger. He could feel it in the air, in the tension that lingered just beyond the hills, in the way the sisters' eyes darted to every small shadow. He did not know how he would protect them, but he knew he would try. "You'll be safe here tonight," he repeated. "Tomorrow we can figure out the next step. You will not be alone." Lyra and Nea's lips trembled into the smallest of smiles, a glimmer of trust breaking through their fear. They curled up on the hay, still close to the cats, and closed their eyes, finally letting themselves rest. Jack sat back, leaning against a post, his mind racing with possibilities. He could not ignore the danger. The Empire was vast, and even a single alert could bring disaster, yet he could not turn them away. Hours passed. The wind moaned softly outside, carrying the occasional distant sound of wildlife. Jack's thoughts wandered to his own life, to the simplicity of the farm, and how it had been interrupted in the most extraordinary way. He had faced storms, equipment failures, crop failures, and isolation, but never anything like this. Two alien sisters fleeing a powerful galactic force had found refuge in his barn, and somehow, despite the enormity of the danger, he felt ready. As the night deepened into the quiet hours before dawn, Jack noticed something strange. The air around the sisters seemed to pulse faintly, a rhythm almost like breathing, but not their own. The cats stirred, their ears twitching as if sensing it too. Jack's brow furrowed. He did not understand it, but he did not fear it. The sisters had chosen him, and whatever this was, it had to be part of their story, part of the reason they were here. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the barn walls. Jack rose slowly, careful not to wake the sisters. He opened the side door and stepped outside, taking in the quiet landscape. His farm, his fields, and the distant hills were unchanged, yet everything felt different. The world had shifted in one night. Two fragile beings running from an empire had appeared at his door, and he had said yes. He had given them a chance, a small refuge, and perhaps in the process changed the course of his own life forever. When he returned inside, the sisters were awake, sitting quietly on the hay, their eyes alert but calm. Jack smiled, offering them more bread and water. "We need to plan," he said gently. "The Empire won't give up, but we can be clever. We can survive." They nodded, their expressions serious. For the first time since arriving, they seemed almost hopeful. And Jack, the quiet human farmer, felt a spark of something he had never known before, a sense of purpose far greater than tending crops or feeding cats. He was now a protector, a strategist, and perhaps a hero in a story he had never imagined. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint hum of distant engines. Somewhere out there, the Empire was moving. But in that barn, on the edge of the quiet colony, Jack, Lyra, Nea, and the cats had found a moment of peace, a fragile sanctuary. And as long as they were together, they would face whatever came next. Morning light spilled into the barn, casting long shadows across the hay. Jack moved quietly, careful not to startle Lyra and Nea. They were awake already, their large eyes alert, scanning the room as if expecting something to happen at any moment. The calm of the night had been deceptive. Jack knew the danger outside was real and persistent. The Empire did not give up easily. He had learned that quickly enough in the briefest stories he had heard from travelers and colonists. He set down buckets of water and fresh bread near the sisters. Lyra reached for it first, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft, almost afraid to speak too loudly. Nea's gaze shifted to the barn door where the light had begun to shine brighter, making the shadows dance along the walls. Jack understood her instinct. They were not used to safety, not for long. "Listen," Jack began, settling onto the edge of a wooden crate. The Empire will look for you. They track people like you using energy or signals. I don't know exactly how, but I know they are persistent. If we are not careful, they will find us. Lyra swallowed, nodding slowly. We can hide our signals, she said, her voice gaining strength. But it will take time. If they find us before that, we will not survive. Jack nodded. He had no weapons, no high-tech equipment, nothing that could match the Empire's strength, but he had his land, his knowledge of terrain, and his mind. Humans were resourceful, unpredictable. They had survived for thousands of years through cleverness, not strength. He had to trust that. We need a plan, Jack said. Something simple, something they will not expect. We have some time before the day is fully bright. I need to understand exactly what we are dealing with. The sisters exchanged a look, then Lyra spoke. We were traveling from colony to colony, hiding from patrols. Our abilities, they can detect energy. We can sense when someone is near, even far away. But if we push too much, we attract attention. That is why we run. Jack considered this. It explained why they had appeared so suddenly at his barn. He had never seen anything like them. Their presence was faintly electric, like the air before a storm. He could feel it just barely. So, he said carefully, you can sense them coming, but you can't stop them alone. No, Nea said, not without help. We are small. We are weak in this world, but you humans, you are clever. You can think differently. Jack smiled faintly. He had never felt more needed in his life. All his quiet days of fixing machinery, tending crops, and caring for stray cats had led to this. He was ordinary in the eyes of the galaxy, but tonight he would make a difference. He moved outside to the barnyard, breathing in the crisp morning air. The cats followed him, their paws soft against the earth. He walked slowly, looking at the hills surrounding his farm. He thought about how he could use them. The terrain was rough, full of hidden paths, ditches, and rocks that could serve as obstacles. Perhaps that could give them an advantage. When he returned inside, he began to explain his plan to the sisters. We'll stay here for now, he said. I'll set up traps and diversions around the property. Simple things, noisemakers, hidden pits, anything that will slow them down. You two stay quiet, stay hidden, and alert me if you feel anything unusual. We need to buy time until you can leave safely. The sisters nodded, trusting him in a way that amazed Jack. They were small, fragile, and yet brave enough to put their lives in the hands of a stranger. That trust was sacred. He would not betray it. Jack spent the rest of the morning working quickly. He rigged simple alarms with string and tin cans, dug shallow pits covered with branches, and set up reflective surfaces to confuse anyone watching from a distance. The cats prowled around him, occasionally batting at the materials with curiosity. By noon, the farm had transformed. It was still a humble place, but it had become a labyrinth of cleverness designed to buy time against a foe that seemed unstoppable. The sisters observed quietly, fascinated. Humans, Lyra whispered to Nea, you are strange. You do not have powers like we do, yet you can think in ways that surprise us. It is impressive. Jack overheard the comment and smiled. Cleverness can be more dangerous than power sometimes, he said. The afternoon passed, and with it came the first sign of danger. A distant hum reached Jack's ears, faint at first, growing steadily louder. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The Empire had found them sooner than he expected. He ran back to the barn, motioning for the sisters to follow. They are close, he said quietly. I can hear engines. We need to stay calm and follow the plan. The sisters nodded, moving quickly but quietly to the back of the barn, where Jack had cleared a hidden exit that led into the woods behind his farm. We can guide them through the terrain, Nea said, her voice urgent. We know how to mislead them if we move carefully. Jack led the way, the cats trailing behind silently. He felt the thrill of fear, but also a strange exhilaration. For the first time, he felt alive in a way he had never known. He was protecting lives, making choices that mattered, and thinking in ways he had never had to before. Humanity was clever, and in this moment it was enough. The hum grew louder, and soon the first patrol scouts of the Empire appeared over the hill. They were humanoid, tall and armored, with scanners hanging from their shoulders. Jack froze for a moment, then signaled to the sisters. They moved with him through the hidden paths, avoiding the open spaces, using every trick he had prepared. The patrols stumbled over pits, triggered noise alarms, and were distracted by mirrors reflecting the sunlight. Jack could hardly believe it. Simple human cleverness was working against a superior force. The Empire scouts regrouped, shouting commands in their strange language. Jack's heart pounded. They were intelligent, persistent, and armed, but Jack remembered the stories of human ingenuity, the small victories against impossible odds. He needed to be fast, creative, unpredictable. Using a rope he had tied between two trees, Jack created a swinging tripwire that sent a patrol stumbling into a shallow ditch. The sisters, using their psychic abilities, sensed which direction the remaining scouts would take and whispered guidance to Jack. Together they became a seamless team. The sisters' powers and Jack's human cunning complemented each other. They were small, vulnerable, but dangerous when united. Hours passed in this tense game of chase. Jack realized that the Empire underestimated humans. They assumed he would act predictably, follow their rules, or surrender. But humans did not follow patterns easily. They adapted, improvised, and survived. And tonight, a quiet farmer and two alien sisters were proving that to the galaxy. By late afternoon, the patrols had been temporarily forced to retreat. Jack, exhausted but satisfied, led the sisters back to the barn. The cats greeted them with quiet meows, unaware of the danger that had passed so close. Lyra and Nea slumped onto the hay, breathing heavily. We almost didn't make it," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "But we did," Jack said, smiling faintly. "And we will continue to do it. You are safe here, at least for now. We will need a longer plan, a way to keep you safe for good, but tonight we survived." The sisters looked at him with gratitude. There was more than relief in their eyes. There was awe. They had seen humans before, but they had never understood what humans could do when pushed to their limits. Jack had no powers, no weapons beyond his mind, yet he had turned the tide. That was the essence of humanity: resilience, ingenuity, and courage. Night began to fall again, but this time it felt different. The air was lighter, filled with cautious hope. Jack built a small fire and shared bread with the sisters, telling them stories of his life, of the quiet lessons of the farm, of the ways humans had survived long before anyone could imagine. The sisters listened, fascinated by the simplicity and power of human endurance. As Jack watched the firelight flicker across their faces, he knew that the coming days would be even more dangerous. The Empire would not forget this night. They would return, stronger, smarter, and more determined. But Jack felt a new confidence. Humanity had survived worse than the Empire, using brains instead of brute force. And tonight they had done it again. The sisters curled close, exhausted, but no longer afraid. Jack stayed awake, keeping watch, thinking of new ways to protect them. He had never imagined that his quiet life on a small farm could become the front line of a battle against one of the galaxy's most feared powers. But he had learned something vital. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and brave. And sometimes that was enough to turn the tide. Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky. Somewhere far away, the Empire would be gathering, planning their next move. But for now, Jack, Lyra, Nea, and the cats were together, safe in a small barn at the edge of a quiet colony. And for tonight, that was enough. Jack felt a spark of hope, the first in a long time. He did not know what the future held, but he knew this. Humans were clever, humans were brave, and humans could survive. And with that thought, he leaned back against the wall of the barn, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the barn was quiet, but the air was tense. Jack moved carefully, preparing for what he knew would come. The Empire would not give up, and now that they had seen a human outsmart their patrols, they would come back stronger. He filled the water buckets, stacked the bread, and checked the small traps he had set the day before. The cats wandered around lazily, but Jack could feel their alertness too. Even animals seemed to understand when danger was near. Lyra and Nea watched him closely. Their eyes, wide and alert, reflected the seriousness of the situation. "We need to move soon," Lyra said softly. "The Empire will return in larger numbers. If they see your traps, they may know someone is helping us. They will come prepared next time." Jack nodded. "I know. But moving too soon is also dangerous. If we leave before dark, we could be seen easily. I need to find a way to mislead them, to give us an advantage even if they bring more patrols." He paused, thinking of the landscape around his farm. The hills, the hidden ditches, the thick trees, they could be weapons if used wisely. He had no blasters, no shields, no advanced technology. Only his mind, his farm, and his understanding of how the land could be used. Nea tilted her head, studying him. "Humans think differently," she said quietly. "We would flee in panic. You plan, you adapt. That is why we trust you." Jack smiled faintly, appreciating the compliment. Then let's trust each other, he said. We survive together or not at all. The day passed slowly. Jack continued to prepare. He reinforced traps, cleared hidden paths, and set up distractions with mirrors and shiny objects to confuse distant observers. The sisters helped where they could, using their psychic senses to detect anyone approaching from far away. They had grown slightly stronger since arriving at the barn, but they were still small and vulnerable. Jack knew that every step they took had to be calculated, every action precise. As evening approached, the hum of engines grew faintly in the distance. Jack's heart quickened. The Empire was coming, and this time it would not be a few scouts. He counted at least a dozen vessels descending over the hills. They were faster, larger, and more intimidating than the ones from yesterday. Jack felt the tension in the air but refused to show fear. He had to remain calm for the sisters, for the cats, and for himself. "Stay close," he whispered to Lyra and Nea. "Follow my lead." The sisters nodded, their hands brushing against each other for comfort. They had begun to trust Jack completely, and that trust was a heavy but empowering responsibility. Jack moved them through a hidden path behind the barn, one that led into a dense part of the woods. He had cleared it yesterday, but today he had reinforced it with small barriers and misleading signs for anyone following. The forest was quiet, the shadows deepening with the setting sun. The Empire scouts appeared first at the edge of the farm. They had advanced sensors, but Jack's traps and diversions worked beautifully. A tripwire caused one of their patrol droids to stumble into a hidden pit, crashing noisily. Mirrors reflected light into the eyes of another patrol, forcing them to shield themselves. Jack felt a surge of pride. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and once again, ingenuity and courage were proving more powerful than brute force. But the Empire was clever too. They adapted quickly, using drones to scan the terrain. Jack realized that a direct confrontation was too dangerous. He needed a plan that was faster, smarter, and more daring than anything he had tried before. He glanced at the sisters, who were following quietly. "We will need to split them up," he said. "If we can lead some of their forces away, we can buy time for you to escape further into the hills." Lyra and Nea looked alarmed. "We do not want to fight," Lyra said. "We just want to survive." "You won't fight," Jack reassured her. "You'll hide and I will draw their attention. Trust me." He took a deep breath and moved into the open, waving his arms and shouting to draw the attention of the nearest scouts. They were startled by the boldness of a human standing alone in the twilight. Jack ran toward the edge of the field, dodging scanners and using his knowledge of the terrain to move unpredictably. The Empire forces split, some chasing him, some staying to search the barn and surrounding woods. The sisters stayed hidden, pressed against the thick roots of an old tree. They watched Jack's movements with a mixture of fear and awe. Even in the face of enormous danger, he was calm, confident, and decisive. His actions were risky, but they were working. The Empire had underestimated humans once again, assuming fear would dictate behavior. Jack was proving them wrong. He led the chasing scouts into a narrow gorge, where he had previously set up a simple but effective trap. Rocks balanced precariously on a slope slid down with a gentle nudge, forcing the patrols to stumble and fall. Jack moved quickly, leaping across narrow paths, guiding them into areas where the terrain slowed them down. Every movement counted. Every second he bought the sisters was a victory. Lyra whispered to Nea, her voice trembling. "Do you see? Humans, they are dangerous even without powers. They think they adapt. We cannot underestimate them again." Nea nodded silently, her eyes never leaving Jack. He was small, alone, and vulnerable, yet somehow he had turned the situation to their advantage. They had fled from the Empire countless times before, but never with someone like Jack, someone who could outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. Hours passed in a tense, desperate dance through the hills. Jack's lungs burned, his muscles ached, but he could not stop. Every glance over his shoulder reminded him that the Empire was relentless, but he refused to give them any satisfaction. The sisters' psychic abilities helped him sense distant patrols, giving him small windows of opportunity to move safely. The cats, somehow keeping pace, appeared almost fearless, darting through brush and hiding where needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack led the Empire scouts into a dense part of the forest where their ships could not follow. He ducked behind a massive tree, panting, and signaled to the sisters to follow. Lyra and Naya moved quickly, their expressions a mixture of relief and astonishment. Jack had not only kept them alive, but had done so without confrontation, relying solely on cleverness and precision. They rested briefly, catching their breath. The hum of engines in the distance faded as the Empire regrouped, unable to immediately locate them. Jack looked at the sisters, noticing the faint glow returning to their eyes. "We did it," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We survived. And we will continue to survive, but only if we are smart, careful, and unpredictable." Lyra smiled faintly. You are incredible," she said. "We have seen the galaxy, faced dangers beyond imagination, but you are human. And humans are more dangerous than anyone thought." Jack chuckled softly. "We can be clever when it matters," he said. "Brains over power, always." The sisters nodded, feeling a new sense of respect for this quiet farmer who had become their protector. They had fled countless threats, but never had they encountered someone so fearless, so inventive, and so determined to keep them safe. Jack's courage was not just in facing danger. It was in thinking ahead, anticipating threats, and turning the odds in their favor. That was the true power of humanity. As night fell again, they returned to the barn, exhausted but safe. The cats greeted them, curling against their legs for warmth. Jack built a fire, and they all sat quietly, savoring the small moment of peace. Outside, the stars glimmered faintly, indifferent to the struggles of a few on a small farm at the edge of the colony. But inside the barn, there was life, courage, and hope. Jack looked at the sisters and said, "Tomorrow, we plan for a longer journey. We need to find a place where the Empire cannot reach us, at least for a while, but tonight we rest. You are safe here, and for now, that is enough." The sisters, curled close to each other, smiled. They had never known trust like this. They had never known safety like this. And they had never encountered a human like Jack, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in thought, courage, and heart. As Jack watched the firelight dance across the barn walls, he felt a strange mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. He had faced danger, protected lives, and outsmarted a superior force. He had proven, at least to these two fragile beings, what humans were capable of. He was no hero in the galaxy's eyes, but to Lyra and Naya, he was everything. And in that quiet moment, Jack realized something vital. Humanity did not need ships, weapons, or armies to make a difference. Intelligence, courage, and compassion could turn the tide against the most powerful forces. He had seen it tonight. He had lived it. And the journey was only beginning. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint hum of distant engines. The Empire would return, stronger and more determined, but Jack no longer feared them. He had something they could not predict, a human mind, sharp and relentless, working alongside two alien sisters determined to survive. That was more powerful than any weapon the galaxy could offer. Jack settled back, letting the fire warm him. Tomorrow the journey would continue. Tomorrow the Empire would challenge them again. But tonight they had survived, and survival, he knew, was the first step toward victory. The next morning, Jack awoke before dawn, his eyes scanning the quiet farm. The barn was calm, the cats curled around the corners, and the sisters were still asleep, exhausted from the previous day's ordeal. Jack knew, however, that calm was temporary. The Empire would return. They always did, and now that they had seen him outwit their scouts twice, they would come with more force and more determination. Jack moved quietly, checking each trap he had set. Some had been disturbed by the patrols yesterday, but most remained functional. He gathered his tools and began reinforcing weak points, sharpening stakes, and creating new diversions. The morning air was crisp, and his breath rose in small clouds as he worked. Every moment counted. Each adjustment could be the difference between life and death. When the sisters awoke, Lyra stretched slowly, blinking at the weak sunlight streaming through the barn windows. Naya was already alert, moving to check the hidden exit Jack had prepared. "Do you think they will come today?" Lyra asked softly. "They will," Jack replied. "And this time they will bring more than scouts. They'll try to flush us out, but we can be ready. We have the advantage of surprise, and we know the land. That counts for more than their weapons." The sisters nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. They had always relied on fleeing, on hiding, but now they were part of a plan. Jack's human ingenuity had turned the tables before, and they were learning quickly how to complement it. By mid-morning, Jack had completed the final preparations. He had dug false paths, set up noise traps, and scattered mirrors to confuse any aerial sensors. The barn was a fortress of cleverness rather than strength, and Jack felt confident it would hold at least for a while. Suddenly, a distant hum reached their ears. Jack froze, signaling for silence. The sisters pressed close to him, their eyes wide with anticipation. The sound grew louder, unmistakably the engines of the Empire's vessels descending toward the farm. Jack's heart beat faster, but he did not show fear. Calmness, he knew, was contagious, and he needed the sisters to trust his actions completely. "They are here," Jack whispered. "Follow me." He led them quietly to a hidden path behind the barn, a narrow passage lined with dense trees. The branches created a natural barrier, hiding their movements from distant scanners. The cats followed silently, their small forms almost invisible in the shadows. Jack's mind worked quickly, thinking of every possible angle, every hidden threat. The Empire might have more power, but humans had ingenuity, and that was a force they could not anticipate. The first patrol arrived at the edge of the barnyard. They were faster, stronger, and better equipped than the previous day. Jack observed them carefully, noting their formation and movements. He waited for the perfect moment, then triggered one of the noise traps. A tin can rolled down the slope, clanging loudly. A patrol droid stumbled, losing balance and exposing the path further into the forest. Jack moved swiftly, leading the sisters along the hidden trail. Lyra whispered, "They are clever, but you are cleverer." Jack smiled faintly. "We have to be. If we are not, they will find us." The Empire scouts regrouped quickly, scanning the forest with drones. Jack knew they would be trying to anticipate his movements. He slowed, creating confusion, then darted into a clearing, drawing their attention. The sisters followed, moving with precision, their psychic senses guiding them around the patrols. Every step was deliberate, calculated, and necessary. Hours passed as they maneuvered through the terrain. Jack used every trick at his disposal, false trails, hidden pits, and sudden changes of direction. The Empire's forces were strong and organized, but they could not predict human unpredictability. Each time they thought they had him cornered, Jack had already moved, leaving only confusion in his wake. By afternoon, the Empire realized they could not simply chase them through the forest. Jack had anticipated this, setting up a diversion that forced part of their forces to retreat temporarily. The sisters looked at him with awe. "You plan faster than we can think," Nea said. "It is remarkable," Jack shook his head. "Not faster, different. You sense energy, I sense patterns. Together we are stronger than they expect." The sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the forest. Jack led the sisters to a ridge overlooking the farm. From this vantage point, they could see the remaining Empire forces regrouping below. Jack pointed to a narrow gorge leading away from the ridge. "This path is dangerous, but it will give us the advantage," he said. "We can force them into it and control the pace of the chase." The sisters nodded, trusting his judgment completely now. Jack could see the mixture of fear and admiration in their eyes. They had fled countless threats, but nothing had prepared them for a human's ability to think under pressure, to turn the odds in their favor with nothing but cleverness and courage. Jack led the way down the ridge, moving carefully. The Empire scouts spotted them but hesitated, unsure of the terrain. Jack used this moment to create a small landslide, sending rocks tumbling into the gorge and forcing the scouts to stop. The sound echoed through the hills, masking their true path. The sisters moved behind him, silent and precise, their psychic senses alerting them to distant movement. As they continued, Jack noticed something unusual. The Empire's sensors were struggling with the terrain, their advanced technology less effective in the dense forest and uneven hills. This was an advantage humans had always exploited, understanding the land in ways machines could not. Jack's heart lifted slightly. They had a chance, but only if they remained focused. Night fell quickly, and Jack led the sisters back to a hidden clearing he had discovered earlier. It was small, but it provided cover and a vantage point over the surrounding area. He built a fire cautiously, its light contained within a circle of stones to prevent detection. The sisters sat close, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and relief. "You were right," Lyra said softly. "Humans, you are more dangerous than we imagined." "Not because of strength, but because of mind," Jack shrugged modestly. "Brains overpower, always, that is how humans survive." Nea leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "We have traveled the galaxy, hiding from empires, fleets, and hunters, but you have changed everything." You have shown us that even without power, even without armies, humans can outsmart anyone. Jack felt a quiet satisfaction. This was the essence of HFY, humanity's ability to survive, adapt, and prevail against forces far greater than themselves. He had no idea how the Empire would respond next, but he knew that the sisters' trust in him was unshakable. And that trust, combined with human ingenuity, was a formidable force. Hours passed in quiet vigilance. Jack could hear distant sounds of engines, the Empire searching, but none came close enough to threaten them. He watched the stars appear in the clear night sky, thinking about the long journey ahead. The Empire would return, stronger and more relentless, but humans had a quality the galaxy often underestimated: unpredictability. The sisters, resting beside him, had begun to regain some strength. Lyra stretched her arms and smiled faintly. "We can survive this, can't we?" she asked. Jack nodded. "We can, as long as we think, plan, and trust each other. We are stronger than they expect, and that is our advantage." Night deepened, and Jack kept watch while the sisters slept, the fire flickering softly. He thought of the coming days, of the need for a longer-term plan to keep them safe. But for now, they had survived another day. They had outsmarted an overwhelming force using only cleverness, courage, and teamwork. That was a victory in itself. In the quiet, Jack reflected on the journey so far. He had lived a simple life on a small farm, tending to crops and feeding stray cats. Yet now, he was at the center of a story that stretched across the galaxy. Two alien sisters fleeing a powerful empire had trusted him completely, and he had not failed them. The wind whispered through the trees outside, carrying faint echoes of distant engines. The empire would return, but Jack no longer felt fear. He had a plan, a strategy, and something the empire could never predict: the human mind. He knew that the coming days would be even more dangerous, but he also knew that with ingenuity, courage, and trust, they could survive anything. As dawn approached, Jack finally allowed himself a moment of rest, leaning back against a tree. The sisters stirred, smiling faintly at him. For the first time since their arrival, they felt hope, not just survival. And Jack, the quiet human farmer, realized something important. Humanity's greatest strength was not in machines or weapons, but in thought, courage, and the ability to adapt. Outside, the stars faded with the approaching sun. Inside the clearing, a small fire burned, casting long shadows across the trees. Jack, Lyra, Nea, and the cats had survived another day. The Empire would return, but they were ready. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet strength of nature and the trust of two alien sisters, Jack felt a fierce pride. Humanity was clever, resilient, and unstoppable when it mattered most. The morning light crept through the trees, painting the clearing in soft gold. Jack stirred, careful not to wake the sisters, but he could feel the tension in the air. Today would be decisive. The Empire would not rest, and now they would bring everything they had to capture Lyra and Nea. Jack rose quietly, stretching his aching muscles. His body was tired from days of running, planning, and leading the sisters through traps and hidden paths, but his mind was sharp. Fatigue could wait. Survival required focus. He moved through the clearing, checking the traps and obstacles he had set. The false paths, the hidden pits, and the mirrors reflecting the morning light were all intact. The Empire had learned from the previous encounters, but humans were always unpredictable, and Jack intended to use that to his advantage. Lyra and Nea had already begun to stir, their eyes glowing faintly with energy, but they had grown stronger over the last few days, their powers more controlled and more precise. "We have to move soon," Lyra said, her voice steady but quiet. "They will be here in hours, and they will bring more ships," Jack nodded. "I know, but today we don't just hide. Today we fight in the way we know best. Cleverness, strategy, unpredictability, that is how humans win." Nea watched him carefully. "We have seen fleets and armies, but you can think like a predator. We will follow your lead." Jack smiled faintly, feeling a surge of determination. The Empire was powerful, yes, but they had underestimated humans again and again. Humans were adaptable, inventive, and fearless when it mattered most. Today would prove it once more. By mid-morning, the distant hum of engines grew louder. Jack led the sisters to a higher ridge overlooking the forest paths they had traversed. From here, they could see the Empire's ships descending, larger and more numerous than ever. The patrols spread out, searching systematically, scanning for energy signatures, drones hovering and probing the forest canopy. Jack studied their movements carefully, noting every pattern, every predictable step. "Look at their formation," he whispered to the sisters. "They move like they always do, expecting us to run or freeze. We'll do neither. Watch and follow my lead." Lyra and Nea nodded. Their trust in Jack had grown into something deeper, a reliance on his mind, his instincts, and his human ingenuity. They had fled countless dangers across the galaxy, but never had they encountered someone who could turn a desperate situation into a controlled strategy. Jack waited, analyzing the terrain. The forest floor was uneven, with hidden ditches, thick roots, and scattered boulders. He had memorized every path, every obstacle, and he had prepared traps that would force the Empire to follow him into disadvantageous positions. The sisters' powers would guide them, detecting patrols before they arrived, giving Jack precious moments to act. As the first patrols entered the clearing, Jack triggered the first diversion. A mirror reflected the sunlight directly into the sensors of a drone, causing it to misread the landscape. A small pit, previously hidden by leaves, swallowed another patrol vehicle's wheel, forcing it to stop. Jack moved swiftly, leading the sisters through the hidden paths he had memorized, drawing the Empire further into traps. Hours passed in this tense chase. Jack's muscles ached, but his mind was razor-sharp. Each decision, each movement, each subtle change in direction kept them one step ahead. The Empire had brought more forces than ever, yet every predictable move they made was countered by Jack's cleverness. Lyra and Nea's psychic guidance complemented his strategy perfectly, sensing threats long before they arrived. By late afternoon, the Empire realized they had been outmaneuvered. Their frustration was evident in the tense communications that carried faintly through the forest. Jack smiled quietly. They assumed size and power equaled control. They had forgotten that intelligence, adaptability, and unpredictability could turn the tide. The sisters had survived countless hunts across the galaxy, but they had never witnessed a human using thought as a weapon before. Jack led them to a hidden gorge, a narrow path he had discovered days earlier. It was a risky choice, but it gave them control. The Empire forces, confident in their numbers, followed into the gorge, unaware of the subtle traps and diversions Jack had set. Rocks balanced on slopes, hidden pits, and snares made the narrow path treacherous. Jack moved carefully, the sisters following, their small forms guided by both instinct and his commands. The first patrol stumbled over the traps, halting the advance. The Empire soldiers attempted to regain formation, but the terrain was unforgiving. Jack signaled to the sisters, who sent subtle psychic pulses, disorienting the scouts further. The patrols were confused, slowed, and forced to adapt to conditions they had not prepared for. Every second Jack gained was precious. Every mistake by the Empire widened the advantage he had built. As evening fell, the final confrontation approached. The Empire realized they had underestimated a human farmer and two alien sisters. They had not anticipated cleverness, improvisation, or the ability to use the environment to their advantage. Jack knew the moment had come to turn the chase into a decisive action. He paused at the edge of the gorge, signaling the sisters. "We'll make our stand here. They expect us to run, but we will control the battlefield." The Empire scouts hesitated, sensing danger but unsure of its source. Jack had arranged the gorge to favor his position, narrow paths for the Empire to follow, hidden pitfalls and diversions to split their forces. The sisters positioned themselves strategically, ready to use their psychic abilities to mislead and confuse. The first patrol advanced, confident, but immediately disrupted by the traps Jack had prepared. Soldiers stumbled, their equipment malfunctioned, and the environment itself became a weapon against them. Jack moved fluidly, signaling the sisters to act at precise moments, creating chaos among the Empire forces. Hours of calculated movement, improvisation, and teamwork paid off. The Empire's forces, though larger and technologically superior, were repeatedly outsmarted. Jack's ingenuity, combined with the sisters' abilities, forced the Empire into retreat, unable to capture their quarry. By nightfall, the forest was quiet again. Jack, exhausted but alert, led the sisters back to the hidden clearing. The cats followed as if sensing the victory. Lyra and Nea looked at him with awe. We have survived," Lyra whispered. "All our lives we have run, hidden, and fled, but today we were protected by a human, and not just protected but guided to victory." Jack shook his head modestly. We survive together, cleverness, patience, and trust. That is how humans survive. That is how we turn the impossible into possible. Nea smiled faintly. You have changed everything for us. We have traveled the galaxy, hiding from threats beyond imagination, and we have never seen such courage or strategy. You are human. Jack leaned back, watching the stars appear overhead. Exhaustion pressed on his body, but his heart was light. Humanity had survived again, not through brute force, but through mind, courage, and heart. He had proved to Lyra and Nea, and perhaps to the galaxy, that humans were more dangerous than anyone expected, not because of strength, but because of unpredictability and ingenuity. As the fire burned softly in the clearing, the sisters and Jack shared a quiet meal, the cats curling around them for warmth. They talked little, but the silence was filled with understanding. They had survived a force far greater than themselves, and in doing so, they had formed a bond that transcended species. Humanity had shown its true strength, and the sisters now understood why humans were never to be underestimated. The night deepened, and Jack kept watch, his eyes scanning the forest and the sky. The Empire would return, perhaps, but they would not be prepared for a human mind that thought differently, acted unpredictably, and never surrendered. Lyra and Nea, sensing his determination, rested peacefully, knowing they were safe for now. Jack thought of the journey ahead. They would need to leave the colony eventually to find a safer place where the Empire could not reach them. But for tonight, they had survived. They had outsmarted a powerful foe, not with weapons, but with strategy, courage, and the trust between them. That was humanity's greatest weapon, the ability to endure, adapt, and overcome when all seemed lost. As dawn approached, the clearing was quiet but alive with a sense of accomplishment. Jack looked at the sisters, their expressions showing a mix of awe and gratitude. "We will move on soon," he said. "But remember, wherever humans go, we survive, we adapt, we overcome. That is who we are." Lyra and Nea nodded, their eyes shining. "We will remember," Lyra said softly. "We will never forget what humans can do. You have shown us courage, intelligence, and heart. That is more powerful than anything we have ever known." Jack smiled. "Then let's rest for now. Tomorrow the journey continues, and we will face it together." The stars faded as the sun rose, casting light across the forest and the clearing. Jack, the sisters, and the cats had survived. They had faced an unstoppable force and emerged victorious, not through strength, but through intelligence, ingenuity, and trust. Humanity had once again proven its worth, not just to itself, but to beings across the galaxy. And in that quiet moment, Jack felt the truth of it deeply. Humans were clever, resourceful, and fearless when it mattered most. They could endure, adapt, and triumph against the odds. He had seen it tonight, lived it, and now so had the sisters. The Empire would return, perhaps, but they would never underestimate humans again. And Jack, a quiet farmer on the edge of a colony, had proven what humanity could do, that even in the darkest moments, with courage, intelligence, and heart, humans could rise above any challenge. The clearing was silent now, except for the crackle of the fire and the soft purrs of the cats. Jack leaned back, watching the sky lighten with the promise of a new day. He did not know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. Humans survived, humans thrived, and humans, when pushed to their limits, could achieve the impossible. For Lyra, Nea, and the cats, the barn was a sanctuary. For Jack, it was proof that human courage and cleverness could face any force, defy any empire, and protect the vulnerable. That was humanity, and it was unstoppable.